All right, I had to go out of town for about 4 days for a family Christmas thing, and I'm back, and this is just going to be a speed round of getting caught up on some things I've been waiting for parts on that all arrived while I was out of town. This is a Blackstar HT Club 50 Mark II. It had a defective bass pot. We had a little bit of a fun game with this. The first one that arrived was not shipped in a padded envelope or box, let alone a box, and it arrived smashed. And the second one finally arrived, and Blackstar support is not great. There's only one place really to get that pot from, and they were slow, and I don't want to drag anyone through the mud, but you know, the correct pot finally arrived. I installed it. It's a dual gang, tiny little 9mm or whatever, the little greenies, and was a pain to change, but it's changed. Now everything's working just fine, and I biased it all up. The bias was not set right, and so here's clean one, clean two, overdrive one, overdrive two. So all these things don't have the greatest longevity, and a lot of what you're getting here is essentially overdrive pedals put into the amp, just like the digital reverb, which is usable. You know, it does have good sounds. I wouldn't describe any of them as great sounds, but they're all highly usable. I understand why people like these. I just wish for your sake that they were built better and lasted longer, and more of the things in them could be repaired easily. It's not because I cannot work on surface mount, it's because the physical layout of things in there makes surface mount repair very difficult, because they're all often surrounded by through-hole components, which means you cannot actually reach the plane where the surface mount stuff is. I've covered that in other videos. That's enough of this. Let me put this back in its head, write up the ticket on it, and move to the next one. All right, next up is that Blues Junior from a month ago, where the board was just all messed up and all the pads on this tube socket were lifted up. So it's got the new board from Brad's Guitar Garage. Very nice, thank you, Brad. And next time I do one of these, I'll do more about it, but this one's rushed for time. So that's all changed out. All the ribbon cables are connected to it. Recapped it, got the MODs here. Did my standard bias tweak. I took out the bright cap, and I took out, what was it? C9, which is something that makes the reverb dark in the original circuit, and things are looking much better. You can see here I've got the little bushings that keep the pots more secure. That's how the original pots got broken. All the pots have been replaced. The messed up input jack has been replaced with a switchcraft. All the tubes that it came with are just fine. That's very nice. He kept putting these tube dampers on this one to try to make this not be problematic. It wasn't the tube, it was the socket. So I've moved these to the first preamp tube. But the issue here, as it came to me, if you turn the reverb up, big hum. I'll show you the fix for that. They had the leads reversed, red and white, on this tank. Now on the solid state reverb circuit in these Fenders, you can, if you have the tank reversed, you'll still get reverb. Won't really sound great, but you'll still have reverb, but there'll be hum. With that connected the correct way, like this, that hum is gone. I also bumped up the screen grid resistors, etc. A few other little tweaks here and there. And now I've just got to put the remaining bushing on that pot and put these last two knobs in place. And again, on this era, Fender has it so you have a D shaft knob, but the set screw hits the round, not the flat, because that makes no kind of sense. But anyway, this amp is healthy. Let me button it up and get this one back to the owner. And on to the next one for today. All right, this is that Marshall JVM205C. Had the bad master volume pot. Changed that out, and I was able to retension all these press-on connectors. This board is really solid here. And now the issue I'm having is that, and it's not tubes, I've rolled tubes, and it's not any connections, is if I go to the high gain channel, the lowest gain setting, everything's cool. Go to the next highest, begin to get oscillation. The highest gain has the most oscillation. It's pretty much instant, even at this relatively low master volume setting. So it's a preamp thing. If I tap on the tubes are slightly macrophonic, V2 more so than V1, though I've rolled tubes, and I've tapped on this area. And it used to be worse. I reflowed the grids of V1 and V2, and it's less than it was as far as the microphonics, but the squeal is still there. So the next thing I want to do to see if this is really a problem is I took out this L bracket shield between the input jack. Let me move this so you can see. Between the input jack and the output transformer, there's a metal shield here. I took it out to pull this board. I'm going to put it back in place, at least temporarily, and I'm going to put some metal shielding up here, which would be how this would be when it's actually in the cabinet with a piece of foil, to see if that oscillation goes away. If it doesn't, then we've got to go back in. If it goes away, then it's an oscillation that you only get on the bench. Let's see what we get. All right, lowest gain. Next level up. All right, that's much better. And the highest level. All right, so that's at low master volume settings. Let's increase that a little bit and see where we're at. Let me turn the level on this recording down. So that puts us in a great place. When this is screwed back in place and this is in the cabinet with the foil, that oscillation is going to be gone. If I remove this, I can hear the hum change. So I think I've just about fixed this amp. Let me screw that back in place and try some other things now that I can move to other parts of the chassis. All right, after getting all those that shielding bracket back in place and the shielding on the open side of the chassis, this amp is very well behaved now, and all the flex and problems are gone and nothing's cutting out. Remember, if you're working on an amp on a bench, especially a high gain amp, and you have crazy noise or squeals like that oscillation, even at relatively low master volumes, check your shielding. Recreate the conditions the amp's going to be used under. In this case, not having that shielding bracket between the input jack and the output transformer was just making it unusable on the higher gain stuff. But now we have And yeah, I tested it with the masters all the way up and all that worst case scenario, which I won't subject you in this lav mic to. The amp's very healthy now. I think the owner's going to be thrilled. So on to the next one. This is that JCM 900 SLX from a couple weeks back. And unfortunately, once the owner got it back, it made awful, awful noises and squeals and buzzes and nastiness. And it was not doing that for me. And I went back and watched the last video on it, which was recorded a day before he picked it up, and it was working just fine. But what seems to have happened was a chain reaction. This cap, which was a white box cap, 400 volt, 22 nanofarad, started to leak a lot. And it started a chain reaction because of the way the grids are done in this, and really put a lot of noise on these pots. This pot had been cleaned. I wasn't really happy with it. I was changing this pot as a result of the DC. So it's got two new volume pots. I went ahead and changed all but one of the 22 nanofarad 400 volt caps to 630. So this one, these two in the tone stack, and these two right here on the phase inverter output. I left this one, which is just the input to the phase inverter. There's no real voltage there across it. And I changed out the cathode resistor and the input resistors on the first tube stage, because it had like 2 volts DC on the grids of the tubes and half a volt on the guitar, and now all that's gone. So this amp is healthy now, and it's very frustrating when an owner has a problem after I've done a lot of work on an amp. This one had been fully recapped and recapped well, and all the bridge rectifiers have been replaced with new ones mounted off the board, some heat damage on one part of the board repaired, new screen grid resistors, etc., etc. And I was really happy with it. But once DC gets where it ought not to be, it can start a chain reaction. So 630 volt caps should never have that problem that the 400 volts commonly do. And they did not have that problem when last I played this amp, but life happens, sometimes in horrible, horrible, noisy ways. On to the next one. All right, the last amp today is this Fender 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb. Complaints. The reverb is weak and hums. So I've got the reverb off. Here's what it sounds like. Let's turn the reverb up. Some pretty good hum there. And the reverb's kind of weak. Let's take a look at why that might be. All right, check this out, a comparison. Hum. Much less hum. Now we're going to change the reverb cables out. Even less hum and a stronger reverb. The send part of this old cable was losing signal through the cable, and the orientation of the tank, someone had changed this out, it was 180 degrees out. So it had the RCAs on this side. That's where all that hum is coming from. The other interesting thing I found, because I did some testing before pressing record just now, is that the reverb is ever so slightly weaker if this cable is plugged in, and I'll show you why. The stock factory wiring is terrible. This connector is the ring. This is what shunts the reverb off. It's really close to the ground here, and there's some strands of the ground popping out, and this had some extra strands which were almost touching this, which is also at ground. And I measured 3 meg between the ring and the sleeve with the foot switch opened, which will very subtly affect and attenuate the reverb level. The main problem was the send part of the old cable and the orientation of the tank, but I'm gonna resolder this and try to clean this up, because that's just inexcusable that you buy an amp for, what are these, $1,600 or so from Fender? And this is the foot switch wiring that comes in it. Yes, it matters. All right, so I cut off about the last half inch, started afresh, and there's no stray strands, nothing touching where it shouldn't. Everything's nice and clean, good solder joints. And now when it's open, it measures infinite, not 3 meg. And there's no audible difference between having this connected or not as far as the reverb response. So I think the owner's going to be very happy. Didn't need a new reverb tank, just needed the old reverb tank oriented the correct way. It needed a new $7 RCA cable and to have the foot switch wired by someone who cares. So I'm going to stop here for this video, and I've got some more amps to do in a similar vein tomorrow because catch up is fun.